Hey, it's kind of a breezy afternoon, late October 2019. So you guys might have remembered the video, episode 201 of the Typewriter video series I did last week. That wonderful care package from Gregory Short of the 3 thermoelectric typewriters plus some Abacus goodies. So I've started looking at the Sharp PA-1050 typewriter. It was the dirtiest of all the 3 and needed some work, and so last week I did a little bit of cleaning through the slot below the paper cover, but really was unable to do a thorough amount of cleaning. So this morning I decided I'm going to take this thing apart and really hit it and really clean, degrease the drive mechanism, the gears, re-grease them and get them all in good shape, and that's what I did. And then we're going to look at an overview of this typewriter, how it works and all that, so stay tuned. Well, the challenge is always when you're working with these little mechanisms with plastic gears is you have to use caution when you're cleaning the gears because the teeth are very soft plastic. I did on a few times use a fine knife blade to kind of get within the teeth carefully, very gingerly, to get some crud out of the teeth of the gears, but mostly I used a cotton buds and a toothbrush and a little bit of alcohol, not too much. But then you want to use the right grease. I had some of this older gear and bearing grease for VCRs. This is probably 20-something years old, and I need to get some new grease, like lithium grease, for plastic gears. But anyway, re-grease it properly, clean it properly, and get it back together in the right order. And be very careful with those ribbon cables when you're disconnecting it, like this typewriter. The ribbon cables for the LCD display, you have to take that off very carefully. Once you take the whole top half of the typewriter off, you'll have the keyboard itself will be loose, just sitting in there, and of course that's attached by a ribbon cable also. So you got to be careful with those ribbon cables when you're doing this kind of work. Everything's kind of fragile. Okay, this is the drive system for the belt that runs the printhead back and forth. There's a motor underneath this plate. It has a brass gear, engages this big plastic gear, and then there on top of the plastic gear is the sprocket for the belt itself. So it's a pretty simple drivetrain, just really two main gears. And I haven't loosened the mounting screws yet for the motor, but there may be slots underneath there where you can adjust the meshing between the brass gear and the plastic gear. On the other end of the toothed belt right here is the other sprocket that the belt runs around, and it has this plastic bracket that's spring loaded, and that provides a preset amount of tension for the belt. It also provides you a way to release the belt from the sprocket on the other side if should you need to clean it and stuff. So this motor on the left, what this drive system does is it raises the printhead away from the platen. By operating this sprocket into this gear, which turns this cam, this white arm right here will effectively raise, it rotates this shaft that the white arm is connected to, and that rotates the printhead back slightly away from the paper. There's a spring underneath this arm that pushes up against a metal plate here, and that just is a return spring for that lever. But this basically rotates the printhead away from the paper, whereas the other motor on the right side operates the pressure rollers, which serve as the platen. There's a brass gear drives a plastic gear train composed of these 2 stacked gears and this one, and this sprocket here drives the pressure rollers. So instead of there being a solid platen, there is a series of pressure rollers along this shaft here. Now you might be able to tell that the sprockets, the gears, are pretty dirty. There's some dirty old greases, and I'm going to be cleaning those up with a mascara brush and some alcohol. And then I have some of this grease that I used to use years ago for VCRs, but I'm going to do a thorough job here of cleaning all these gears and getting the whole thing cleaned up. So there's a screw right down here you remove, and one on the other side, and then one recessed here behind the pressure rollers and one on the other side. Those 4 screws enable you to pick up the whole print mechanism far enough out that we can get to our little sprockets here. Okay, I'm going to try taking off these C-clips or E-clips and take these two sprockets out so I can clean them better. I was trying to clean the gear teeth with the mascara brush, but there's still some gunk in those teeth that I can't get easily, so I'm going to have to try to take these out without losing the washers. Okay, there's that. This one has a little split, a little thing in it we have to respect when it goes back. And then the other one, okay, I've taken off the little E-clip off of the second sprocket. I'm going to set it down here without losing it, hopefully. Now, try to pull off this second sprocket. And boy, it looks pretty dirty along in here. A lot of cleaning. I'm going to use a toothbrush to get into the teeth of this sprocket before I re-grease it. Try to get all the residue out. Some of those little pieces are really stuck in there. I'm going to have to very gingerly use a knife blade to try to clean these sprocket teeth out and get the dirt out. So these mascara brushes seem to work better than just about anything for cleaning these tiny gears, but unfortunately, once you put a little alcohol on them over weeks, they tend to break, so I have to end up using them like this. But they do get into the little teeth quite easily here. Even the little secondary sprocket on this gear, it seems like it pretty much cleans it up nicely. Keeping in mind that these are plastic gears, so if you do have to pick out any dirt with a metal tool, like a knife blade or a thin screwdriver, you want to be very careful because obviously the teeth are softer than your tool. So this is why I like to use one of these mascara brushes if I can. Okay, so the shaft that the main sprocket went on goes here, and this whole plate is just completely full of old residue and crud, and oh, look at that. I'm going to try to clean that shaft off as clean as I can. Okay, so here's that first drive gear that I've been cleaning, and now here is the second one. As you can see, it's really dirty still. So I'm going to have to get my little mascara brush, clean the teeth out. Okay, now the shaft here of the rollers, right here, that this sprocket engages into, has some little particles and grease in it, and I'm sort of just going around with a cotton swab with a little bit of alcohol on it to clean all that old grease and dirt out. And I've also cleaned the brass gear of the motor itself. And I'm cleaning the rubber rollers with alcohol. Okay, this little gear goes on first. The big gear engages the motor. There is a little bit of slop in the motor mounting plate to move the motor tighter or looser to adjust the meshing with this big sprocket. And then the small E-clip goes on to this. Okay, this shaft in here where this sprocket goes, there is a pin that goes across that shaft in there, and these two little notches in the end of that have to engage those pins in order for the sprocket to be able to actually turn the shaft. Okay, I got the small E-clip on. I'm going to try to get the large one on. Make sure that it is secure. Looks like it is. Okay, by operating that spring-loaded lever on the other side of the drive belt, I was able to loosen up the belt enough to pull it off of the sprocket here. And now I'm going to pull off the E-clip here. It's very dirty. And pull off this. There's a white plastic washer. All this has to be re-greased. And right here, the sprocket. All this has to be cleaned up and re-greased. Okay, I have a little bit of alcohol on this mascara brush tip, and I'm just trying to clean up the teeth of the brass motor gear. A lot of the grease on here, like this right here, is hardened over the years into a hard kind of compound that just doesn't come off easy. You have to kind of scrape it off. Probably going to have to do that with the gears, but the challenge is going to be with them. You have to be very careful because they are plastic. You don't want to damage the teeth. This brass gear is a little more rugged. Try to clean up the shaft as much as I can of the old greases. Yeah, definitely. Okay, this sprocket, along the bottom of it, there is this hardened grease that's almost like plastic, and getting it off without damaging the plastic gear itself is a little tricky. Gotta be very careful. Well, you want to get all this old lubricant off, clean it up really good, and then put fresh lubricant on it. Okay, so I've cleaned off the bottom of the sprocket, and I had to use some alcohol to dissolve some of this stuff, and I've done the secondary sprocket here. Now I'm doing the rim of the main gear here with the mascara brush to try to get gently into the teeth of the plastic gear without damaging it. Just to try to, sometimes you want to just flush a little alcohol onto your mascara brush and just carefully get all this hardened stuff out of the teeth. Alright, so my little container of this grease is getting low because I've been using it a lot lately, so I'm going to put some of this on the motor shaft, the shaft of the sprocket, and then I'm going to put some around the hub, axle of that, and also the front of this. I want to grease it because it has to slide, rotate along that plastic washer. So make sure that's there. Okay. Then I'm going to grease the washer like that. And then I put the E-clip on. Like that. Maybe clean up some of the little excess grease on that E-clip. Like that. Okay, now I'm going to relieve the tension on this drive belt on the other side and install it like that. Okay, so I've degreased this cam and put new fresh grease on it, degrease this whole arm. So this cam doesn't turn all the way, it turns from like here to here, and what it does is it lifts this bar right here. That bar pulls the printhead back and forth right there, away from the paper. So this segment gear here basically just turns maybe 180 degrees almost to operate the bar that moves the printhead toward and away from the paper. Okay, this is the left hand sprocket that supports the belt, and so I've taken off the little cover. There's an E-clip on that, of course, taken that off, and so now I'm just cleaning this up, and I'm going to re-lubricate this sprocket point right here. Alright, going to put this E-clip back on. With a pair of needle nose. The trick is getting it on so the clip doesn't go flying off everywhere. There we go. Okay, so here is the drive belt, and there is this metal plate back here underneath it that the printhead slides back and forth on. I've cleaned and re-lubricated it, and then there's this drive shaft, this round shaft that the printhead mechanism rides on. I've cleaned it, degreased it, and re-lubricated it with lube. So all that hopefully is going to be good. And this is the typical mess you end up with afterwards. All these cotton swabs with old grease and stuff you've cleaned off. Yep, gets to be quite messy. Okay, so I'm going to make an attempt to clean this keyboard. The keyboard actually is loose right now. And just getting the dirt cleaned off from around the edges. I've already taken an air compressor and blown out between the keys and brushed it with my toothbrush. Just kind of doing a cleaning up here before I put it back together. Okay, well, this is the top of the unit. It has the LCD display, and underneath it is a little circuit board with some integrated circuits and a ribbon cable that connects to the main motherboard on the bottom half of the unit. So I'm basically just cleaning up all these little edges that have crud and dirt and all that from outside that have gotten in over the years. There are two brass screw points here that are basically inside the battery compartment. And then the rest of the shell comes off just by kind of snapping it, unsnapping it from the base. It's a little bit trickier to take apart than the Brothers or the Canon Type Star. Okay, earlier before I took this apart, I put in some of these rechargeable D cells underneath the battery compartment, and this here, this flat metal plate, is the positive terminal, and these batteries weren't making contact with that positive terminal. This sits in a plastic little groove, and it was just too flat, so I just reformed this plate so it kind of bends out or bows out in the middle closer to the battery, and that fixed that problem. And then the other problem with the batteries is the negative terminal, this spiral coil that gives you a spring tension, was all corroded, and so I had to take a little Dremel with a metal brush and grind off all that corrosion on the tip of that spring. Okay, I've cleaned up this case pretty good, and let's see if I can get this ribbon cable in here safely into this connector. Push down the connector. Okay, now the case attaches to the front of the keyboard first, kind of snaps in place, and then you have to kind of work it around the edge to get it to lock into place before you can put the screws in to the holes down here on the battery compartment. Okay, this is the battery compartment lid, and the original foam that was on here had just disintegrated, and so this is some of this sponge foam that comes as packing material with a lens, and this is double-sided sticky tape, so this will hopefully keep the batteries nice and secure so they won't get pop loose. Let's see how this works here. I haven't really tested it. Let's see, get it in there. Nice and snug. Wow, that's encouraging. Let's get a sheet of already partially used paper and put it in here. So now this machine has no manual platen knob. You have to just drive the rollers up and down. So let's see how this works. Yes, it works. Ta-da! Okay, so I'm going to thread some paper up in here. I have this little paper roll holder. This is actually made of foam core and gaffer's tape, and what I did to it is I have a tear strip from a roll of aluminum foil that I've hot glue gun into the front edge of this, so it's easy now to tear off the paper a little neater from the roll. I'm going to thread some paper up here. Now this typewriter does not have a platen knob. You cannot turn the platen manually, so you have to release the pressure roller here, which basically releases the platen, and then you can kind of work the paper around all through there like that and actually get it straightened up. And now, when you turn the machine on, the switch is on the right side here. There is a set of keys right here, up and down, and you can drive the platen a half space at a time or hold it down and drive it fully like that. Okay, the general layout of the keyboard, the main thing is down here on the left is this code button, and you use the code button in conjunction with these other controls up here to set everything up. So if I press code and type style, which is the 7 key, I can switch between 10 character per inch, 10 script, or 12 character per inch. Line spacing, of course, you can switch between 1, 1.5, and 2 lines. Print display, you can go direct print, line print. And line end, you can select between a manual and automatic carriage return. And I found that automatic carriage return is a nice feature. Line print mode with automatic carriage return, that gives you the best usability. It'll automatically do the carriage return when it gets to the hot zone. Now up here on the upper left is the print density, and the print density opens up a menu where you can switch the printing density between 1 and 5, and I usually keep it at 5. And then there's a display control, and this basically is the contrast of the display you can adjust. So I leave it about 4 usually. So above the 8 key is a double, and if you select double, it'll stretch out the characters horizontally, double width. Bolding makes the characters darker, so we hit the bolding, and there's an underscore control also. And there's also other embedded characters in some of the keys. There's a right margin flush, there's centering down here on the C, there's a line form, and all that. A few other types of controls. Over here is your left and right margin set. You can reset, you can set the hot zone, and you can clear all your tabs right here. And there's a relocate key next to the space bar for when you're editing something you've already typed in the screen. You can then relocate back to the end of the line where you finished typing before. I would like to change my margins now, and so when you're doing the margin changing, you want to make sure you're not in the automatic carriage return mode. So line end, I'm going to go to manual, and print display, I want to go to the direct print mode, not the line print mode. And now I can use my space bar and my arrow keys. So I'm going to go to the left here, set left margin, and then I'm going to space over. I'm going to make it about 70. Right margin, like that. And now, once I've set the margins, I can go back and set my line end to automatic carriage return. I can do print display to the line print mode instead of direct print. And now we can do some typing. It's pretty good quality imprint. So depending on how you've set your margins, when you start a new line, the display will give you the number of characters remaining in that line. And as you type, that number will decrement down to when it beeps at you about 9 or 10 characters before the right margin, and then it will do the carriage return. Now, the reason why it didn't do automatic carriage returns is because in the hot zone near the right side of the margin, it'll only do an automatic carriage return if you type a space or a hyphen. Otherwise, it'll run to the right margin, beep at you, stop, and then you can either hit the margin release and keep typing or hit the carriage return manually. Now here's a feature that this machine has that most of my other thermal typewriters don't have. It has a nice, sharp, smooth edge on the paper scalies. And that gives you the ability to neatly tear off your paper. Not all of these thermal typewriters give you that ability, but the Sharp does. Okay, I'm going to switch this to the 12 character per inch mode, so type style 12. And immediately the number of characters I have available goes up to 70 per line based on my current margin settings. And it's nice I'm down to 10 characters so I can tell how close I am to the margin itself. There it is. The single biggest difference between the display on the Sharp PA-1050 and the other brands of thermal typewriters I have is this is a two-line display. It starts in the upper left, and as you type, it'll fill up the display, and as you're typing words, it's just going to truncate wherever it happens to truncate it. It'll continue the same line on the second line of the LCD. So you have essentially what amounts to a full line of printing on two lines of your LCD. And you can go back here with your cursor keys and you can do insertions and deletions. For instance, if I want to delete, I can hit delete. If I want to insert, I'll insert some characters, and then if I hit this relocate key, it'll relocate me back to where I started. I can continue, and etc. So it is nice having a two-line display. It is about the same size of characters in the LCD as some of the other single-line displayed machines, but it is nice, and it's also nice having that counter, the character counter that counts down to the right margin itself. This machine has an alternative keyboard called Keyboard 2. You access it with the code button down on the lower left here. So this little illustration is really handy for understanding how the characters work. So here's an example of a key that has 4 different characters. The two on the left are using the standard keyboard, and you would use lowercase for the 1/2, uppercase for the 1/4. Then when you convert the machine to Keyboard 2 by pressing the code button and Keyboard 2 symbol, which is above the 3, when you go to the Keyboard 2 mode, you're going to, again, if there's 2 characters on the right side of the key, the bottom one is a lowercase Keyboard 2 and the upper one is uppercase Keyboard 2. So when you see characters like, for instance, the B here, the beta, that is going to be accessed via Keyboard 2 shifted only, or this right caret is Keyboard 2 shifted only. Right, whereas these will be accessed via lower and uppercase Keyboard 2. Okay, these characters over here, the tilde and the caret and the umlaut and the 2 accent marks, part of the Keyboard 2 keyboard, those are dead keys, and they don't print anything until you type a letter with them afterwards. And so this page 53 of the manual indicates the combinations you can get using those various key combinations with your letters to get all these different accent marks. Okay, the decimal tab feature is you hit the code key and the tab set. The front of that key says D-tab set. You basically, in the direct print mode, you move your cursor over to where you want the decimal point to be, and you set the D-tab with the code D-tab. Then you can go back to your automatic carriage return mode, line print mode, or whatever. And now, as I type, let's say I tab over to that point and I hit Let's see, $1,156.78. All my decimals are lined up like they should be with the decimal tab feature. Now, as far as the keyboard itself, this is not too bad of a keyboard. I think I like the Casio Writer's keyboard better. This is very much like a computer-style pseudo-mechanical keyboard. I do like the shift buttons are nice and wide, and the carriage return here is nice and big. It's easy to hit the carriage return and not mistakenly hit something else, and it's easy to hit the shift here on the right without hitting the carriage return by mistake. That was one feature of, I think it was the EP43 that I didn't like, was the fact that it was too easy to hit the carriage return instead of the right shift. One of the features that all of these thermal typewriters that I've tried have, I'm not really sure if I like it, is the caps lock. The light here, the green indicator LED lights up when you're in caps lock mode, but it won't unlock when you hit caps lock again. You have to hit the shift key to unlock it. And I've repeatedly made the mistake of trying to unlock the caps lock by hitting it a second time like you would with a modern computer, and ended up typing extra capital letters when I didn't want to. So you just got to remember when you want to cancel out of shift lock, probably the best thing to do is use the right shift with your right hand just to remember it better, rather than trying to figure out which one of these two keys to hit. So caps lock, unlock caps. Now, there is one feature that makes this Sharp thermal typewriter different from all the others in my collection, and that is it has a memory, an internal memory. It is a 4,000 character memory internally, and so you can create a whole document in the memory, store it, and then you can print it out at any time in the future. You can also print out excerpts of a document and insert them in, like a document that's been stored in memory. You can take excerpts of that and you can print it to your current letter that you're printing, for instance. So internal memory, there's also an expansion module on the bottom of the machine for an external memory module that you could have used to store even more documents in there. And there was also an optional spelling dictionary module that would plug into that, where you could spell check your documents in the internal memory using this dictionary module, which of course I don't have either. But 4,000 character internal memory, that brings the possibility of this machine being able to function a lot closer to like an IBM Wheelwriter kind of machine, where you can format an entire document in the text and do all the formatting ahead of time in the 2-line LCD screen and then print it out as you wish. Besides this being a thermal typewriter, in the context of that term meaning printing directly to thermal paper, it also implies that I could take it out and about without any thermal paper at all, without any paper at all, and use it like an AlphaSmart Neo, in a sense. Having a memory, having a display, being able to type directly into the memory, and printing at a later time when I come home. So that is interesting. So how do I see the Sharp PA-1050 in terms of where it falls in comparison to the other machines in my thermal typewriter collection? Well, it may not be the first machine I'll grab, let's say, but if there is a certain situation where maybe I don't want to take a roll of thermal paper with me, maybe I don't want to take any paper with me, maybe I just want to snap that clamshell lid on, grab it by the fold-out handle, and cart it around just that way without any bag at all, that would be a great use case, because I could type directly into its internal memory when I'm out in the field, and then at a later date when I come home I could print that out onto paper, either roll paper or sheet letter paper, thermal paper. I think that's one of the major use cases for that Sharp typewriter. And of course, minus the paper that you might want to take with you, this machine is really nicely portable. This has the 4 rechargeable D cells in it right now. So with rechargeable batteries in here, it weighs 2,501 gram, or 5 pounds, 8.2 ounces. That was a little overview of the Sharp PA-1050 thermal printing typewriter with memory. And if you guys have any questions, there are a lot of pages to this manual. This is a 89-page manual. So here's the manual. If you guys got any questions about how it operates, drop them down below and I'll try to answer your questions individually. Oh, and I didn't mention earlier, someone has typed their own instructions clarifying how some of the features work, and they've taped them into the booklet here, which I think is really cool. Kind of a little customized way of looking at it. So there you go. The Sharp PA-1050 thermal typewriter. Yes, it's a great machine. A little more complicated than some of the others, but it gives you a lot more capability. Okay, guys, stay creative until next time. Yes, that's right. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.